typhoon in Japan, landslides in India, wildfires in the US and storms in Germany. 4 different natural disasters in 4 different corners of the planet. They make for dramatic pictures, but when we show them in the news, they're met with indifference. Show a climate story and most viewers will move on. Do you wonder why? Well, we do all the time. Perhaps people think it's a distant tragedy. It's happening to someone else, far away. It has no clear villain. So why should you care about a climate disaster that is not affecting you directly? I'll tell you why. You should care because it is affecting you in more ways than you can imagine. It is affecting the food on your plate and the money in your pocket, the sugar in your sweets and the tomato in your burgers, even the coffee in your cup. Climate change, extreme weather is impacting all of this and more. India's Prime Minister Modi said as much during his Independence Day speech this week.
आज दुनिया महंगाई के संकट से जूझ रही है। पूरी दुनिया की अर्थव्यवस्था को महंगाई ने दबोच के रखा है। हम भी दुनिया से जिन सामान की जरूरत होती है लाते हैं, तो हमें सामान तो इंपोर्ट करते हैं। हमारा दुर्भाग्य है कि हमें महंगाई भी इंपोर्ट करनी पड़ती है। मुझे तो मेरे देशवासियों को महंगाई की बोझ कम से कम हो, इस दिशा में और भी कदम उठाने हैं और हम उस कदम को उठा के रहेंगे। मेरा प्रयास निरंतर जारी रहेगा।
India's neighbors are struggling too. New Delhi has received a request, an SOS call from Nepal. They want food grains from India. The request was made last week. Nepal wants 1 million tons of paddy and 100,000 of rice. Also 50,000 tons of sugar. There is no immediate shortage, we are told, but there are fears that supplies could run out. So Kathmandu wants to beef up its stocks. It's a precautionary measure. Nepal will soon enter the festive season. So there is a chance that traders will begin hoarding supplies. Now, Nepal heavily depends on India for food grains. From 2021 to 2022, it imported 1.4 million tons of rice from India. 1.4 million. 1.38 million tons of non-basmati rice and 19,000 tons of basmati rice. This was the biggest import on record. But it may not be possible to repeat now because India has banned the export of non-basmati rice. That's what Nepal consumes in larger numbers. So now they've made a special request that they be exempted from this ban. In return, they have an offer for India. And this is what Nepal is offering, tomatoes. If you live in this country, you know tomatoes are a major pain point. Prices have shot through the roof. We've been telling you about this too. By the end of July, tomato prices had soared by almost 300%. What is driving this spike? A shortage in supplies. And what is causing the shortage? Climate disasters. They have ruined the crop this year, so India had to resort to imports from Nepal. Reports say last Monday, Kathmandu dispatched some 30 tons of tomatoes to India. But that has not really eased the shortages. Retail outlets are dropping tomatoes from their menu. The latest to join the list is Burger King. Even tomatoes need a vacation, they say. So they're dropping them from the dishes. Burger King is the 3rd major chain to do this. Earlier, McDonald's and Subway took the same call in India. And such stories are not limited to India. Extreme weather is taking more victims around the world. Indonesia, for instance, is suffering from excessive rain. This has hurt their coffee output. It has shrunk. As a result, prices have shot up. Halfway through 2023, coffee prices went up by 40%, 40% hike. Same with cocoa in Africa. Supplies have been dipping. Ghana is the world's 2nd largest producer of cocoa. Yesterday it said it will export less cocoa. In June, prices touched their highest levels in 46 years. Cocoa prices, the highest in 46 years. Now with Ghana cutting supplies, the prices will rise only rise further. So your chocolates will become more expensive. Then we head to China. It suffered devastating floods this year. This hit their corn and rice supplies. The extent of the damage is not yet clear, but earlier this month, China raised the flood alert level for 3 provinces, Inner Mongolia, Jilin, and Heilongjiang. Now, these 3 provinces account for 23% of China's rice output. What happens if Beijing does not get enough rice? It will turn to the global markets. It will buy extra supplies from the rest of the world. And China has the money to do so, but poorer countries will suffer because there's only so much rice to go around. Also, food exporters are already under strain. They may not be in a position to take the extra orders. They're dealing with shortages. They're struggling to meet the current demand. You can blame climate change for all of this. Also conflict, specifically the war in Ukraine. Let me show you some pictures from yesterday. This is another Ukrainian port that's been hit. It damaged the grain silos. Last week, some cargo ships were under fire. Ukraine was a major supplier of food grains. Despite the war, it continued to supply thanks to a grain deal, a deal that was brokered by the United Nations last year. But last month, Moscow pulled out of the deal, and now it has warned that it will not allow grain supplies to leave Ukraine, which means more shortages for the world. Despite these threats, Ukraine is said to have managed to ship some grains today. It might cool the global markets for a bit, but between climate disasters and this war, the world is set to suffer for the foreseeable future. Now, if Asia were an apartment complex, China would be that one neighbor who doesn't get along with anyone, the one with a reputation for misbehavior, the one known to cause tension and discord, the one who does not respect boundaries. Our viewers in India know this. China remains hostile at the border with India. Recently, military leaders from both sides met. They vowed to, quote-unquote, maintain peace. But the PLA made no commitment to disengage, so the pledge is just hollow words. China's belligerence is on display in Southeast Asia too. They're threatening their neighbors. Tonight, we'll tell you about their latest move. China is building an airstrip on a disputed island, an island claimed by both Vietnam and Taiwan. We have satellite pictures of the facility. It is clearly meant for military use. This is what it looks like. It is located on an island called Triton. This is in the South China Sea. Triton is part of the Paracel group of islands. It is very close to Taiwan and Vietnam. They stake a claim over it. But since the 1970s, China has controlled Triton. And now they're militarizing it. The construction began just a few weeks back. Earlier, there was no activity on Triton. Look at this picture. Most of the island looks uninhabited. Now look at the picture from August 2023, this month. Can you spot the difference? There is a long runway and some structures have also come up. Let's look a bit more closely. The runway is the most prominent structure. It is 600 meters or 2,000 feet long. That's large enough to accommodate some aircraft and drones. But that's not large enough for fighter jets or bombers. What else is on the island? A radar dome, a helipad, a cement plant, and a dock. Construction activity picked up recently. You can see containers and construction equipment in these pictures, but these are still early days. China had built some harbors and a helipad earlier. What they're doing now is basically expanding the infrastructure. And by the time they're done, this island will become a new security nightmare, especially for China's neighbors. Beijing refuses to share any details about what it's doing. They have a standard response. This expansion is for navigation safety. But it's hard to buy the argument. Do you need military-grade facilities for navigation safety? Make no mistake, this is about the South China Sea. The Triton Island is part of the same dispute. China claims ownership of this island. In fact, it claims ownership of almost all of South China Sea. But 5 other players have competing claims. Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Brunei, they too stake claim, sometimes on the same piece of land in the South China Sea. For instance, the Triton Island. China maintains de facto control of Triton, but Vietnam says the island belongs to them. And Taiwan says the same. And here's something else you should know. Triton is one of the major islands in the South China Sea. It was in the news before. In 2018, the US sent a naval ship here. It conducted what it called a freedom of navigation operation. Basically, the American ship sailed close to the island, and the Americans regularly conduct such missions. It's their way of reminding Beijing that this is a disputed region and that China has no right to dictate the rules. So Washington basically backs China's neighbors in this dispute. It's a complex issue, also a major flashpoint in the region. And with its provocative actions, China is fanning the flames. Since last month, tensions have been high. Beijing has been pushing the limits. It began with this statement.
China's sovereignty and rights in the South China Sea have been formed through long-term historical practice with sufficient historical and legal basis and are not affected by legal arbitration under any circumstances.
What was that about? A 2016 arbitration ruling, a ruling that declared that China's claims on the South China Sea were baseless. Of course, Beijing never accepted the ruling. In July, it said the US and its allies are engaging in pressure tactics. They're forcing China to accept the ruling. In the same month, China threatened the Philippines. You may remember this too. That's a Chinese Coast Guard ship. It fired a water cannon on a Philippine vessel. China said this was supposed to be a warning. It warned the Philippines to stay away from the waters, but Manila did not budge. It refused to end its patrols.
It is our prayer that there will be no more water cannon incident. There will be less aggressive reception, to receive a less aggressive reception from the other side, especially because of the international attention that this incident generated.
In response, China is doubling down on its claims it is militarizing more islands and threatening other neighbors. These actions will only raise tensions. Now to the United States. It's the land of the free, but conditions apply. And that condition is gender. If you're a man, America is the place to be. You can flaunt your guns, spew hate on podcasts, even plot attacks on the US Capitol. But if you're a woman, tough luck. You can't even control your own body. The US government will do that for you. Let me tell you about a new court ruling. It will limit access to one particular abortion pill. This one, it's called mifepristone. It's a very important medicine. It makes up more than 50% of all abortions in the US. Until now, it was easy to get. The pill could be shipped via mail. It could also be prescribed by medics who are not doctors. And the time frame was 10 weeks. Mifepristone could be taken up to week 10 of the pregnancy. But the new court ruling opposes this. No mail shipments, no telephone prescriptions, and no 10-week rule. The court says the pill must be taken within 7 weeks. There is a caveat though. The restrictions won't be imposed immediately. The US Supreme Court will be hearing this case soon. It is their decision that counts, and honestly, that's even worse. It's like betting on oil companies to reverse climate change. They are the problem. And what if the Supreme Court upholds this verdict? Then abortion pills will become even harder to get in the US. And I emphasize on the word even harder because 20 American states have effectively banned abortion already. This court case is all about taking it national, to destroy a woman's right to choose. What is President Joe Biden doing about this? He hasn't said anything so far, but expect a generic statement, something about defending the rights of women. And I know what most people will say, it's the court's decision, not Biden's. Yes, it is. But presidents are not powerless figureheads. Their words and actions are important, and Biden's words and actions do not inspire confidence. In June this year, he was addressing a campaign event. No cameras, though. It was only for donors. The White House later published a transcript of what he said, and listen to what he said. I happen to be a practicing Catholic. I'm not big on abortion. But guess what? Roe versus Wade got it right. This is what Biden said. Most people already knew this. Biden, the individual, is opposed to abortion. Biden, the president, supports it. But was it really necessary to say that? And that too in the middle of a national crisis on reproductive rights. Why should women trust Joe Biden after what he's been saying? Imagine him saying the same thing about climate change. I don't believe it's real, but I will fight it. How absurd would that be? My point is, the president is dragging his feet. He talks passionately about Ukraine. He rails about gun rights. But on abortion, he's half-hearted at best. Why? Because he's not big on it. This isn't just about one political party or one court. It's a collective failure of the United States. But who will criticize them? The world is handling America with kid gloves. I'll show you how. A 13-year-old girl recently gave birth in the US, 13. She lived in Mississippi. She was raped. Then she was denied abortion at the local clinic. A 13-year-old, let me repeat that, a child herself. She's just taken admission in class 7, and she has a baby. The world has said nothing about this. Now consider what happened in Peru. An 11-year-old girl was raped by her stepfather. She too was denied abortion at first, but then the United Nations intervened. They lobbied with the Peruvian government, and guess what happened? It worked. The state doctors authorized the abortion of the girl in Peru. Do you see the difference in attitude? Silence in America, intervention elsewhere. What they did with Peru must be applauded. It was the right thing to do. But their silence on the US must also be questioned. We can't keep dismissing this as America's domestic political issue. It is a human rights crisis. 25 million women cannot choose whether to have a child or not in America. How is this internal politics? And the same America then judges other countries. You may remember the anti-hijab protests in Iran last year. Do you know what Biden said then? We stand with the women of Iran. How wonderful. Maybe stand with the women of America too. The US has criticized most of the world on human rights. They have a special report just for it. For 5 decades, America has published the Human Rights Report. Every country gets a chapter, every country except the United States of America. We're not saying standing up for women elsewhere is wrong, or that Iran's women are better off than American women. We are saying, put your own house in order. You don't have control over the Ayatollah in Iran. You don't have control over the Taliban in Afghanistan, but you do have control over your own country. So fix what you can, then fix the world. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Argentina. A bus unexpectedly caught fire on a highway in Buenos Aires. It led to panic among the passengers. The fire started spreading on the highway due to fuel spillage. In Tahiti, people picked up their surfboards for the Tahiti Pro Surf competition. And in a tribute to Indian superstar Rajinikanth, the Japanese ambassador to India danced to his new viral hit. You have to watch the video. And finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1947, the Radcliffe Line was revealed. India and Pakistan had become newly independent from the British rule. The Radcliffe Line divided them into 2 separate territories. This is a man who never visited India, by the way. He divided it. And this was followed by widespread communal violence. We're calling it a wrap. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.